order. Mr. Wilcox, would you lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public participation is next. Dr. Joyner and Dr. White.
Let me remind people that we have 3 minutes, and that when your 3 minutes are up, I'll say time, and you should finish your sentence. Thank you.
Dr. Joyner, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
At this time, there are no hands raised.
I thought you were going to say, when you said Dr. Joyner, are you ready? That you say there were 10 hands raised.
No, we do have one hand now. Robert Simon, you may speak. His hand went down. There are no hands.
Okay.
And there are no hands.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. White. We'll move on to the action items, the approval of the board meeting minutes for September 27th. The motion to accept.
Madam Chair, motion to accept the minutes.
For a second. Mr. Wilcox,
Second.
any discussion? Mr. Conaway?
Yeah, I just have one minor change. On page 4, at the bottom of the page, that should be, instead of the compensation equity committee report, that should be food service report. And then up top, it's the pay equity committee. That's all. It should just be labeled food service. And the last item on the bottom of page 4,
Okay,
that should be food service.
thank you. And then I just have just one also minor one on page 5 for the adjournment on the motion of Mr. Joyner should be Dr. Joyner. Okay, and so seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the meeting minutes to accept the meeting minutes with those corrections. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Jackson on? No. Oh, she's coming on now, so I'll come back to her. Mr. Bolton,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Conaway,
Yes.
and the students are not on, Dr. White?
No, they are not.
Dr. Jackson? We're voting on the approval of the meeting minutes. Okay, Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'll come back to Dr. Jackson if she can hear us. Okay. All right, and so the minutes are approved with the corrections. And we'll move on to the personnel report. Dr. Tracy?
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, board and members of the public who may be watching or listening at this time. I just want to present the personnel report. We have some appointments. We also have one termination that's within the 90-day probationary period. Every new teacher or worker has a 90-day probationary period. If things do not go well, that person can be dismissed within the 90-day period, and so the school has exercised that right. So I ask for the personnel report to be approved.
Is there a motion to approve, Mr. Wilcox?
I move we approve the action items on the personnel report.
Madam Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. I just have a question. I'm probably going blind at this point. I've been on the computer so much, but I don't see the termination.
This second, the one that Matt had pointed out to us, Miss Lisa Mack sent it via email to all board members.
Okay,
Make that correction because someone pointed out where we had it on information item. And so she sent
okay,
that correction report.
okay. Thank you. Mr. Conway? You have to unmute yourself, Mr. Conway.
Dr. Tracy, there were two reports there. Was the termination report on the longer report on the it was not on a blue sheet?
On the short one that Lisa Mack sent out to the board, a new sheet, not the first sheet that came in your packet. We
Okay.
realized that error, and so we redid this piece and sent it out to the board via email.
It was actually sent out by Ray Johnson this afternoon. It was
Right.
forwarded to Ray Johnson and sent out to all the board members.
Right, and it's on page 2 of the,
Page
President,
two.
point of
Information
order.
only.
Yes.
Madam President, point of order.
Mr. Wilson?
Since we received that updated document after the 24-hour notice, and I don't know if it's been posted on the website or not, but we certainly didn't have it in our packages. So can we amend, should the proper motion, the proper action to be to amend this personnel sheet to add that item to it off of the, I guess we call it now is this a purple? This color purple, a purple sheet?
Yes, lilac.
So I would, if that's the proper motion, I would amend the motion for approval. I would amend, I think we have to do this by a 2/3 vote, actually, since it's changing the,
we do.
yeah. So I'm not quite sure what the motion is at this point.
You're
we-
gonna amend the report to add.
Personnel report.
Well, can we withdraw the original motion to approve
Right,
and then make a motion to amend to add that item?
yeah,
That makes sense. Mr. Wilcox?
I will withdraw my previous motion.
I will draw my second.
I think Mr. Alexiadis doesn't agree with our interpretation.
Attorney Alexiadis, go ahead.
I don't really understand what you're doing. The agenda says personnel report. So that would be the only thing that would need to be amended with having been posted 24 hours earlier. This is a report. The report was updated earlier today. I'm certainly willing to listen to alternative views, but I'm because perhaps I'm missing something.
Madam President,
Mr. Wilson?
thank you. I think because this was the amended sheet was sent to us today, actually, I just heard. It wasn't actually posted 24 hours in advance, like all the items on the agenda are supposed to be, that we would be amending I don't think we have to amend the agenda, so I don't think we have to do it 2/3. We just would amend the personnel report to add that additional person. Right now, the report that I'm looking at is a report that doesn't have that Christopher Fry person on it. That's the person we're talking about. Is that correct?
No,
Okay, see, that's why it's important for us to know exactly what we have in front of us.
Scott Hunt is the termination.
Scott.
So,
Okay, Scott Hunt. Okay, yeah, I circled the wrong name. Okay, so I think that just the safest and cleanest way is to amend the personnel report to add that termination to it. I mean, I don't think we have to do it 2/3 to do that because we're not amending the agenda. We're just amending a report.
Well,
but it's also on the Okay. It's also on the information only personnel report.
Right.
The purple one,
But that's not the item, but that's not the report we're voting on,
right.
right?
Go ahead, Attorney Alexiadis. You want to say something?
You need to make sure that the record is clear and that the correct information is both reported and posted on the website. But the report is not official, so to speak, until the superintendent makes a report at the meeting. So
That's correct.
the need to amend the report that is just being given now, I mean, I can't stop you from doing that, but it just doesn't, it's not a procedure that I'm familiar with.
Madam President, if we had just voted on this without having this discussion, I wouldn't know what we were voting on because I didn't see the email that was sent today. It was probably sent late because I checked my emails up to about 2 hours ago. So I didn't see the email about this name being changed or an updated report being done. Anyone else out in the public that was reviewing this would not have seen that either because the emails went to us, but it didn't go to the public. So I would say the safest way to do it is to amend this personnel report to add that name to it that we're voting on, the report that we're voting on. And, maybe we're overdoing it, but it's better to overdo it than to underdo it, right?
Yeah, and it's just a majority vote. It's not a 2/3 vote.
Right.
So
Just may I ask, so I'm clear, what is different about what you're amending than what I just pulled up off the website as the personnel report action items, which lists a termination at the bottom of page 2?
Can I take a stab at that, Madam President? What
Okay,
you're
Mr.
looking
Wilson.
at on the website was not posted 24 hours in advance. So it's not the official item that's on the agenda at this point, the official report. The report that was originally posted was the report that did not have that termination added to it. That was first posted on Friday afternoon, to 24 hours in advance. And it was I don't know when it was redone, but it wasn't redone before the 24 hours. That's the difference. So what you're looking at is what we're not seeing in our packages at this point.
Okay, hold on one second. Mr. Wilcox?
So it seems to me that I could make a motion now to approve the personnel report action items with the addition of the termination moved over from the information only
Yes,
to the actual action items.
I would second that.
so would I, but we don't need.
So let's make the motion then.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay.
And then let's find out in the future.
I move, Madam President, I'd like to make a motion, and that is that we approve the action items of the personnel report with the addition of the termination that was erroneously listed on the information only.
Second,
Any discussion, any further discussion?
I just have one
Mr.
question.
Bolton. Mhm.
Is this the only difference between the original notice that we got and what we're doing today? Is there any other additions to the blue sheet besides that?
No, no other changes.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no discussion, we'll vote on the personnel report with the added termination.
Madam President,
Mhm.
Madam President, I'm sorry. I did have one question. It's not on the item we're voting on, but it's on the non-voting information only. So should I raise that question now?
No,
Okay.
yeah, let's wait until that report comes up, because that's the information on. Okay, so we're voting on the personnel report with the added termination. Dr. Joyner,
Yes,
Mr. Goldson,
Yes,
students are still on. Dr. Jackson? Dr. Jackson? I don't know what's happening, but she's not unmuting herself. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
Mr. Conway,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. And so that item passes. And you had a question on the other personnel report, Mr. Bolton?
Yes, Madam President. The reason why I mentioned Christopher Fry, because that was the item I had a question on. That's why I circled it. So sorry for that confusion. This person is being moved from looks like a teacher to an administrator or administrative intern. First of all, is that right? Is that correct? Is it from a teacher to an administrator intern? It says administrator as opposed to administrative, but I'm not sure if there's a difference. The first question is that correct? Is that a teacher? The second question is there a change in the salary?
Dr. Tracy?
So it's an admin, like we've done several before, it's an administrative intern, it's a linear move. It doesn't cost us any extra funds. It's a teacher who is going to be taking on the help of a school where the assistant principal will be out or has been out. So that person will be supportive of that principal in that school to help with other things that are needed in that school. We have done these before. It's not a promotion. It's not an administrator.
So there's no change in the salary?
No change in salary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Finance and operations, Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you very much. And as is typical, I would, if anybody needs any items moved separately, please let me know. And while you think about that, I have two items I've asked Mr. Conaway to move. As I always point out, my spouse works for Clifford Beers in a federally funded grant program. And abstract number 1 has some funds directed towards Clifford Beers, and agreement number 4 is a no change in funding amount, but I've asked Mr. Conaway to handle those if he would.
Okay, I would like to move item number 1 and agreement number 4 for approval.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any discussion? Mr. Goldson?
Sorry, I'm a little confused. You said item number 4 and agreement number what?
Abstract number 1.
Abstract number
Abstract
1
number 1.
and agreement number 4.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on abstract number 1 and agreement number 4. Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Jackson? Dr. Jackson? I don't know what's happening with her. Maybe her mic is not working. Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Mr. Conaway?
Yes.
Dr. Jackson texted yes. Mr. Wilcox?
Recuse.
Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
And the students are still not in. I am a yes, and so that motion passes. Please continue, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conaway. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion, and that is that we approve the remaining six abstracts, 7 agreements, and 3 contracts that are listed as action items on the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Goldson? You're muted, Mr. Goldson.
I'm sorry. I just have two quick questions, Madam President. Thank you. Items 5, 6, and 7 are all under $20,000, and I'm wondering why.
We can hear
Yeah.
you now, Dr.
Oh,
Jackson.
okay, I'm sorry. I've been screaming. Yes, I put in the chat. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Agreements 5, 6, and 7 are all under $20,000. So my first question is, why are we voting on them as opposed to them being information-only items? And my second question is, I sort of kind of agree. Well, no, I have 3 questions. My second question is, I don't understand the number 5, what it means to provide homeless families with assistance to become self-sufficient in accessing resources. I didn't get a chance to read the documentation, so if I could get a quick update from the chairman on what that actually means. And my third question is, why are they only 1.5 month contracts? So those are my 3 questions.
So as I recall, in general, when things that are under $20,000 are listed as approval items, when we've asked the question as to why those are there, it's sometimes it's when the paperwork comes through to Ms. DeMayo, and whether or not the superintendent has had a chance to fully review all that and not wanting to slow something down.
Understood.
Also, it's for some of these, I like hearing the information about it, because these are also some of the more interesting programs that we're working with some, vulnerable populations, such as the mentioned the homeless. I don't remember the specific parts of that one. It's been a week since I read that, but my understanding is that the accessing resources or accessing a variety of resources, both aid, potential housing, or even hygiene products and so on. But if I remember correctly, that was a Ms. Joseph Lumpkin. So if Dr. Tracy wants to add something more, or we could get an update on that.
Gemma is on here too, can give further explanation. Gemma.
Yes. Yes, of course, Dr. Tracy. Good evening. Mr. Wilcox, yes, you nailed it. Oftentimes the board wants to hear more about the activities that we are doing with disengaged youth. Even though it's $5,000, a lot of questions do arise from that. And so it is expected that regardless of the amount, we are we present in detail to the board. Regarding the self-sufficiency, what we mean by that, particularly in our agreement with Junta and Community Action Agency, is these organizations are not only working on providing services such as daily items and necessary items, they're also working to help those families figure out what their long-term needs are and how they can access services to support those long-term needs. So it's really more around sustainability services and not just the day-to-day items and supports they might need to get by. I think those were the 2 questions. There was a
Madam President?
Mr. Golden.
There was one other question, Gemma, and and one correction is Christian Community Action, not Community Action Agency. And the other question was, why are they only 1.5 month contracts?
Those are bridge funds from the State Department of Education. They're funds that will last, I believe, through November. And then the state has indicated to us that they will be providing additional supports or additional grant opportunities throughout the year so that we will have the chance to expand those services.
Thank you, Madam President.
Also, as long as we have you here, Ms. Joseph Lumpkin, about how many students experiencing homelessness do we have in the district?
Currently, we have identified about 425 students. You will recall that earlier in the year, we were at about 200. Now that we are back in person, we are able to have eyes on our students and notice what their needs are. Another indication for why students, for another case for students in school at this time, our McKinney-Vento liaisons are trained to identify the issues that might represent homelessness and to get those students connected to services as soon as possible. And we anticipate that those numbers will go up throughout the year as well.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the remaining F&O items. Dr. Jackson?
Uh-oh. Hello?
Yes.
Are you calling me for, I'm sorry.
Your vote.
Okay, yes. I'm sorry, Tuesday
Thank you.
nights are my drop-off nights, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries. Are you all hearing that echo? No. Okay, now that she muted herself, I don't hear it anymore. Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and no students, and I am a yes, and so that motion passes. I'm guessing no students report. There's no students on, so we'll move on to the teaching and learning report. Dr. Joyner?
All right, thank you, Madam President. I just want everybody to know I've been in touch with the students, and I've impressed upon them the importance of coming to the meetings. Actually, over the weekend and today. We're doing some, I believe, cutting edge things in terms of trying to create a policy for teaching and learning that reflects our population. And as I said in the last meeting, we are building a school system based on the real needs of the kids and and their families. And what we just voted on is a good example of that. If somebody from 50 years ago came back and looked at what schools are doing now, they wouldn't recognize the system. And that's because the old system basically was based on a deficit rather than a developmental model. And it didn't concern itself with the lives of kids outside of school as much as this one does. And New Haven has the most complex range of student challenges of probably any district in the state. And Hartford probably and some other urban districts. And I would say any district in the country, which means that we have to be better. We have to be more courageous. We have to be more compassionate. We have to be more inventive. And thankfully, we have some phenomenal teachers. So one of the things that we're trying to focus on is creating a learning environment that really is enabling of teachers and students, which means that teachers have to be free to be creative. We have people on our staff that are lawyers, accountants, and what have you, as teachers, and they have to be free to be creative to use not only what they know about the particular content in front of them, but also the skills that they have based on some of their other professional training. So one of the things that we're working on is that we're trying to create a high interest skill-based content. And we're working on a district-wide independent reading project where every kid would be asked to read independently in books of choice, because the research is overwhelming that high volume reading is a cornerstone of high academic achievement and critical thinking. And I'll send you that study. It's called What Reading Does for the Mind by Cunningham and Stanovich. We have some teachers that are already doing that in places like Metro and Hill House and New Haven Academy and Career and HSC. And we want to free them to do more of it. And we want to give them the opportunity. Hopefully we can get resources so we can buy high interest content and relevant and meaningful content. That would also mean that we have to move toward an authentic assessment, mastery-based authentic assessment, that the skills that you learn in school should be immediately applicable to the skills that you apply in thinking about your life, about the world, and in your work site. And one of the greatest skills that you can take generically to any task is the ability to think critically, the ability to reason, and the ability to use language well, both expressively and receptively. And so we're working on that. The other challenge that we have is that we are very ethnically and culturally diverse. This is no longer a black and white world. It's no longer a gay straight world, a straight world. And so it never has been, but we're finally coming to that realization. And we have the talent on our staff to really address the needs of these kids that come from these different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. We are a country based on E pluribus unum, even though that was replaced with in God we trust, but we still are trying to bring together people from diverse cultures and backgrounds and experiences in a beloved community, and that community described by Dr. King. And saying that, it means that we have to go back and perhaps look at some things we've done in the past and try to correct them. One example would be Italian heritage. And I'm hoping that we can work together over the next few months to one, restore that and other ethnic celebrations to our school calendar, to acknowledge the fact that there are differences within the world and that everybody counts, and to also celebrate those differences. And on a last note, so those are the themes that are characterizing the work that we're trying to do now in teaching and learning. And of course, I strongly believe that scientific thinking is at the foundation of what we need to do to help people think more scientifically, so that they can make good decisions about vaccinations and masks and all kinds of things like that. That if education is preparation for life, that they'll be able to do that. They'll be able to make reasoned decisions. I am absolutely shocked at the rationale that some people use to do or not do certain things, when the evidence is right in front of you in terms of the way in which you should go. And then the last thing, we are a very compassionate district, and we have to remain that way. But we also have to hold everybody accountable for carrying out their role and responsibility. The learning environment in any school or classroom can be influenced negatively by just one person. That's critically important. You know, people say we're teaching a student, we're teaching a classroom full of students, and the dynamics of that classroom will determine whether or not it's a good learning environment for everybody in it, the teacher and the student. And I think Mr. Golson mentioned when we're talking about Hill House, in a sense that we got to hold these kids accountable. And I think that there's something going on now in the country and maybe in the world where young people are not always doing the kind of things that they should do in a school environment. A school should be a sacred place. A classroom should be a sacred place. And I think that going forward, we're going to have to come to grips with how to deal with students that are so defiant that they actually make it difficult for teachers to teach and for their peers to learn, and how to deal with them in a humane and compassionate way. And we'll be talking about that in the future, in the very near future. And the last thing is, you know, we had this conversation about supporting the homeless. Just imagine what homework is like for a person who doesn't have a home. I mean, that's the saddest thing in the world. And I commend the board and the superintendent and people in the community that are trying to do the very best they can to people who are considered the least. And but no matter how you're considered, you still have a responsibility to do what you need to do to create a good environment and to be supportive of your peers and be respectful of each other. So we're going to have to deal with those issues as time goes on. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any questions for Dr. Joyner? Any comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Tracy?
Thank you, Madam President. And as I promised, each meeting I'm going to share with you aspects of our strategic plan to keep in the forefront what we're all about in New Haven, our why, our purpose. So again, I know that the board members already have this, but it's worth repeating that we abide by our core values of equitable opportunities, high expectations, a culture of continuous improvement, and collaboration as the core values by which we operate, and that our mission continues to be to provide all students in New Haven Public Schools with personalized, authentic, and engaging learning experiences through creativity, exploration, innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, and high quality instruction. To foster a culture of continuous improvement through collaborative partnerships with staff, families, and the New Haven community, and to support students' growth and development by utilizing the whole child framework. Our vision is to be a premier, the best urban school district that ensures access to equitable opportunities and successful outcomes for all students as they prepare for college, career, and life. Our 5 priority areas that support this foundation thinking is academic learning, youth and family community engagement, operational efficiencies, culture and climate, and talented educators. Without these pieces, and just about all of our grants to the state are written around these 5 priorities. Without these, we really don't have a leg to stand on, because these are important pieces as we wrap around our students. And as Dr. Joyner just ably alluded to the fact about what is currently happening in New Haven school system, students are stressed, teachers, administrators, other staff are experiencing stress. Our students are coming back without a lot of preparation, a lot of gaps, but we're not going to see them as deficient. We're going to take them from where they are and accelerate learning for them. For the first time, we're having students in first grade who the teachers have to drop back to teach them their letters and sounds. That's usually what you do down in pre-K and sometimes to some extent kindergarten for those that did not have pre-K experiences. So these are some of the challenges that are happening. We are also seeing challenges around social and emotional behaviors. And it is something that we're grappling with at the district level. At the same time, youth, family, community engagement folks are working hard to help us wrap around what the needs of the students are. So having said that, there are 3 updates that I have, 4 pieces of updates. One is on what's happening with transportation that has caused some of the stress. Where are we with code of conduct implementation? Update on instruction for students who are being quarantined, and sporting events, security concerns. Let's say a little bit about students who are being quarantined. We, just about every week, there is a person, an individual who is tested positive. Because of that positive test, and sometimes multiple individuals, we have to make sure that we quarantine those students who are closest to them for more than 15 minutes in their presence. That is causing a lot of kids to be home. It's a challenge that we're working on, and we'll talk this evening about how we are working more so to support the students who are being quarantined. It seems like it's something we have to live with. It's going to continue. So far, we have about 97 or 98% of our staff that are in compliance, Dr. White?
Yes.
Are in compliance with the vaccine mandate, which is a good number to look at. And I want to thank especially Dr. White for working so hard in creating systems and structures to monitor this implementation. That was a gargantuan task. And he has taken it on, and the whole team engaged in supporting to make sure we know what it is we're doing. So let me move into Mr. Carl Jackson. Is Mr. Jackson here? Oh, Mr. Jackson is there, and he'll just give you a brief, and I say brief, a brief update on transportation. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy, Madam Chair, members of the board, executive team. This is an operational update. So the current route count is 301 bus routes. We had an increase of a net 2 drivers assigned, which means that we have 278 drivers that are assigned to the 301 routes. The 301 routes are being covered by staff that would ordinarily be managers at First Student, dispatchers, and they are taking drivers from other parts of the state and bringing them over to New Haven so that we can cover the 301. In an ordinary year, absent COVID, absent the driver shortage, we could have as many as 330, 340 routes. But it's kind of tampered down so that we can double up on some of the runs and cover the 301. So we're basically short about 23 drivers at this point. We added 4, but another one resigned. They have 18 that are out on FEMA related issues.
And they have several drivers that are out on COVID-related issues. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. In the training pipeline, they have 37 applications that came in. They have 28 who have their permits actually pending. They're testing one this week, and they have 9 drivers in the classroom. They have 11 drivers that are training on the street. So it's becoming incrementally better. But you know, we have a ways to go. With respect to COVID-19, all total at First Student, there's 364 drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, and managers that are in the testing pool. About 240 of those are fully vaccinated with 2 shots. 117 opted for weekly testing, and then 9 are out for COVID-related issues. So we're getting incrementally better every week, but you know, we still have a ways to go. And we're all scrambling to and competing for drivers all over the state. So the fact that First Student is using people out of the offices and mechanics and anyone that have the proper licenses to make our 301, it's commendable. However, the combination of routes cause excessive lateness and leads to a lot of frustration on all sides. So we're continuing to deal with it on a daily basis. I meet with First Student daily, to try to look at tactics and strategies to overcome the deficit that we're dealing with. But it's getting incrementally better, but it's not perfect right now. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Dr. Jackson.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Jackson. I just have a couple questions. And first of all, I just want to say that Assistant Superintendent Red Hannons and Principal Worthy have really been helping me on this around the busing that goes from Hill House to ECA. There's been a lot of irregularities, and I know that they're working on that. So I want to thank them for that, because very quick response from Assistant Superintendent Red Hannons and Principal Worthy. But Mr. Jackson, this is, I don't want it to become a problem like, when it's starting to get cold, when the weather is not as optimal and the darkness and all, just how things change as we go into the fall. But these children are going to ECA is a part of their education. This is their education, buses coming early, leaving early, all kinds of things that I know are part of what we're dealing with. But I need this to be on your radar. When I called ECA one time, I was told, Mrs. MacArthur, could you help us out? This is a problem from year to year to year. And it's sad that these kids have to deal with this. And now that I'm dealing with it front and center because I have ECA students, it needs to stop. We are messing with, they're running from their classes to get to the bus. We're messing with their education. ECA is not just, they're going and dancing around and, this is their education. And we wouldn't allow this in the mornings for school to be constantly left and late. We would not stand for it, and we should not be standing for it now. So I'm hoping that you could assist these students, because this is their education, because it doesn't just affect Hill House, because the bus leaves Hill House and goes to Cross. But the difference is that Cross students can walk to Audubon and Orange. Hill House students shouldn't and be walking from Hill House to Audubon and Orange. So, and I can tell you that, and I want to thank the Principal Worthy and Assistant Superintendent Red Hannons. My children were told to walk from Hill House to Audubon Street. And they listened because they listened to authority. And it was a big problem. And it was because of the bus. And I don't want to even go into how upset I was and how the thoughts that went through my head, God forbid something happened to my children. But the root of the problem is the inconsistency of the bus from Hill House to ECA. That's my complaint. It's not a rant. It's not a whine. It is a true complaint.
Thank you,
Well,
Dr.
I
Jackson.
certainly share your frustration. I don't know what happened in past years, and you mentioned year over year. ECA is certainly on my radar, and me and my team are working to try to smooth out as much as that is possible. And concurrently, we have additional programs, that require zero load transportation that we're working on. So yes, it is on my radar. It's something that I've been monitoring, and we're going to work to try to make it incrementally better. But it doesn't mitigate the fact that the root cause of what we're dealing with this year is the bus driver shortage. But certainly, I am concerned, frustrated, just like any parent, and I'm going to give it our full attention in the office. Thank you for your comments. It's the first time I heard of it.
Thank you. And just as a something to Dr. Tracy, because she's in charge of the money. This is a program that's not going anywhere. I think it would really benefit the district, maybe to get a specific transportation. I don't know if it's a bus or a van or something that would transport the kids from Hill House and Cross. The program is as old as, I have a cousin who's been out of high school for decades who went to ECA. So this is not going anywhere. I don't know, we should get a bus, a transportation that transports our kids from Hill House and Cross to ECA. I think that will be a investment that would pay for itself with peace of mind of getting them to ECA on time for their education.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Go ahead, Dr. Tracy, if you can.
Ms. Jama Joseph Lumpkin will, and let me acknowledge Dr. Jackson. I hear what you're trying to say. That would have to be, a board's decision down the line or something like that. So code of conduct implementation, Ms. Jama Joseph Lumpkin.
You had me go in there, Dr. I thought you were going to say that I was going to handle the transportation issue.
Let me just quickly say, if we can hold our questions till the end of the reports, I think it would make it a little bit easier and quicker.
Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Tracy. And so our code of conduct nests within our strategic plan across culture and climate, academics, and certainly in priority area 3.3, where we look at supporting at-risk youth and expanding restorative practices across the district. Dr. Joyner mentioned the Martin Luther King quote that we use in our training, which is where our focus is right now, training. And as Dr. King said, our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. And when we train our administrators tomorrow as part of our ongoing effort to bring that restorative lens and what restorative practices mean, this quote will be front and center as part of our work.
Amen.
So we want to remind folks that the restorative history, unlike what most people think, did not come out of the criminal justice system originally. This was part of the indigenous communities and some faith-based communities that have been existing for thousands of years. And the countries such as Australia and New Zealand began to use this work to help us deal with when harm happens in the communities. So since February 8th, when this plan was adopted, we have been able to move forward through intensive training. Our biggest achievement is to be able to hire restorative coaches who are now working in-depth to support schools. At least one person in every school, we are working to be trained as a restorative ambassador. 80% of the restorative work we are emphasizing is in prevention. We are trying to dispel the myth that restorative is about just reducing suspensions and expulsions, those 6 components of community building circles, classroom agreements, use of effective language, problem-solving circles, conflict harm circles, and formal restorative conferencing are all part of a way of preventing harm from happening in the first place. Our training continues this fall. Introduction to Restorative Practices is available. Introduction to, we're going to be focusing on conferencing. We're going to be doing restorative conferencing to repair harm, and intensive training we expect to continue through January 5th. Camille Thorne, Nikisha Cadeau, Sergio Rodriguez are supporting our schools. They are out meeting with principals, getting to know principals, helping to work on the whole school restorative approach, which includes formal conferencing, as I mentioned before, school-wide prevention, getting the work to our students around community circles and classroom agreements as a way of helping our students to understand that they play a big role in this work. And I'm going to stop there and respond as appropriate.
Thank you, Gemma. We'll move on to update on instruction for students in quarantine. Since the last time we reported, there's an update. Ms. Tiffany Jackson.
So thank you, Dr. Tracy. I just have to say thank you to Ms. Dina Natalino, who is the supervisor of college and career, who really has taken over the efforts in this particular area. So out of, since we've started this work, we've had 50 classes that have been in quarantine. 92% of those classes have been assigned tutors. At this point, we have about 25% of the students who are taking access or accessing this service. We're providing virtual instruction after school. The way that it's organized right now is that tutors are assigned by grade level and work across schools. The virtual tutoring sessions are determined by the teachers for 2 hours a day. As I mentioned, that was an update the last time, and still an update that Yale, I know there was conversations about what is it that we're able to provide during the day. Yale is providing us with tutors to support the teachers. Again, as I mentioned, we have teachers across K-8 that are servicing across schools. What will happen is that we'll have the Yale tutors who will be coming in actually in the next couple of weeks, who will be coming in and working with those teachers who are after schools by grade levels, enough to be able to provide parents with an option both during the day and after school. So we will be coming back in mid-October just to evaluate how the services are being delivered and if we need to make any changes, but we're pretty confident right now that the students that we are matching with teachers, those are teachers who are fall within their current grade levels. So teachers are well versed with the materials that are being taught during the day, as well as those teachers who are in constant contact with their current teachers. So that's the update that I have at this point in time. And when directed, I will be more than willing to answer any questions.
Ms. Jackson, were we able to get some retired teachers who are working with our students during the day?
So we were able to, before we got the Yale tutors, we actually had 3 teachers, retired teachers, who were willing to come in and work virtually during the day. But what we determined is that we were matching the Yale tutors to each of the teachers who are working after school. So at this point in time, we do have teachers who are going to be working directly with those tutors to provide those supports.
Thank you. Sporting events, security concerns, Mr. Eric Wachowski.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Tracy, board.
You always have me.
I've met with security last week and with our executive team, and we feel that for the high school students that game by game, we can meet with administrators in the different high schools and come up with a plan to allow kids back into the games. We would do that on a week-by-week basis. We do feel that middle school and younger kids should still be accompanied by parents. I think that was one of, although we had some fights earlier in the year, a lot of the issue which caused the chaos was the amount of young kids that were just running around unattended. But I did speak with Mr. Worthy today. I plan to speak with Ms. Johnson tomorrow. We did speak last week about this, but now that they have a better handle on their, knowing who their students are and who would be coming and going, we feel that we could safely allow high school kids to come back to our sporting events not attended by a parent. And I would, we've changed what we did security wise and how we operate games. We would keep those procedures in place, and our security and police numbers would stay in place. But we do feel confident that we could ease that restriction, on a game by game basis in consultation with administration. So I'd also be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eric. So thanks to Mr. Jackson, Ms. Gemma Joseph Lumpkin, Ms. Tiffany Jackson, and Mr. Eric for making these presentations. And as we move forward in the school year, we'll have more people presenting and giving updates as to what's happening in the system. So at this time, Madam President, we can be open up for additional questions that the board may have.
Mr. Goldson and then Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that compromise where the high schoolers, after security and others meet, can start to go back to their games without their parents, I think is reasonable. Middle schoolers, that makes sense. I mean, some of those folks are really young, and parents should be somehow involved in their attending those games. So I'm very supportive of the movement that you're making on that. I did send a notice to the board to the president and to the superintendent that I would like to see some kind of update on what our policies are around bringing toys to school that resemble guns and other weapons. I'd like to know what the policy is and how we handle that. I know in the past, children as young as 7th, 8th grade have been suspended for bringing toy guns to school, or BB gun, I guess it was, that was unloaded. I'd like to know what our policy is overall. Is it school by school? Is it student by student? How do we make those decisions when a student is suspended, when a student is not suspended? What is the policy? I think this is a good opportunity to educate the community and board members, because I'm not sure what the policy is. I'm bringing those toys to school and how they're dealt with. So I'm hoping that perhaps on the next agenda, we could get an update on that. I guess that's sort of kind of related to the code of conduct, which is why I brought it up. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Jackson and then Mr. Wilcox.
He just want to say this is just a comment. This is for Dr. Tracy and her team. I'm seeing such an increase in office visits around mental health, and it is going down to the elementary school. A lot of anxiety, anger, just, I'm not quite sure if it's just adjusting still to coming back to school after being out for so long. And then just the pandemic itself, coming out of this. But I just want to say that whatever we're doing, please continue or increase it. Just the mental health focus right now is just so important. And honestly, I haven't seen this much in a while. Before the pandemic, I wasn't getting so much anxiety, especially in the younger children. That's starting to reveal itself. A lot of somatic complaints that really, aren't medically, but just somatic, vague complaints. And it's, I would say, on a daily basis, when you're seeing between 30 and 40 patients, and out of that, you're getting like 5 to 6 anxiety diagnoses and somatic complaints. That's a lot. And it is really a reflection of where we are right now. So whatever we're doing, which I know we're doing the Mindful Wednesdays or something, but we really need to pay attention to that and start looking at who's coming back to school with, what parents are calling in, telling the nurses particularly, this is what's going on, or when teachers are getting, so-and-so's not coming to school because of this. And it winds up being around anxiety, things like that. We need to see where we are with those numbers, because if that's as high as I feel like it is, then we need to add something else around the mental health, addressing that coming out of the pandemic. I mean, it's just extremely high. And honestly, I was wondering if it was me, but then I recently read an article around the ER visits that are also being seen around mental health crises in pediatric patients. It kind of really shook me, like, no, I'm not imagining this. It's not just me. So I really think that we should make sure that we're engaging our mental health partners as much as we can, and understanding that this is real. And if we don't really hit it hard, not only are we going with the academic backslide that we're dealing with, but even as the years go on, it's going to be bananas. And our kids, they really can't help it because they're not knowing how to deal with this. So that's my comment. I just want to make sure we're really focused on that also.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Mr. Wilcox and then Dr. Joyner.
Thank you very much. The questions that I have are related to the Code of Conduct implementation update. So I appreciate thank you very much, Ms. Joseph Lumpkin, for your report on this. A question that I have is related to how this is factoring out into disciplinary decisions. So I guess my question is, would someone be able to describe the training that's happened for teachers and administrators in the schools on the changes in the Code of Conduct and the related policy that we pass it, that the Code of Conduct was part of?
Yes, we have begun to share, and we will do more of that training tomorrow, specifically where the changes are within the Code of Conduct language, and where we are currently with the implementation of our restorative lens. This is a long-term training. It is not something that will happen in the period of time since we've been back. And so we are working with Dr. Tracy and our executive team to make sure that, as Dr. Tracy mentioned today, move towards restorative academies so that we are providing more intensive supports even after school for our teachers and other leaders to participate in that training.
All right, thank you. I agree, it's going to take a while. I mean, there's a lot of changes in the Code of Conduct, and it's a lot of changes in the whole basic philosophy of dealing with disciplinary issues. So I agree, it's going to take a while to implement those through a large system like this one. My question is, and it's not something that I have an answer tonight, but has the district identified the metrics that they're going to use to see if this was a successful change? I would assume some of the disciplinary related metrics related to numbers of detentions, expulsions, suspensions, etc., the basic ones, but are there any others?
Yeah, those are some. However, we are also working on self-assessment that we started with administrators and teachers, and we are going to be collecting those throughout the year as a measure of where we are, where administrators and teachers believe where they are at this point, and where we land by the end of the school year.
Okay. And just a final thing, I guess it's a warning or a heads up. This was about the 6-month mark since the board passed all this. So I will at least maybe others as well, be asking for another update, maybe in another 6 months around the anniversary of, so that maybe the first meeting in February or whatever, just to talk about how this is going and make sure that it's being implemented as the board intended. Thank you.
Oh. I'm sorry, would I be able just to say one other thing about the metrics? Because to Mr. Wilcox's point, outside of the standard metrics that we use, one of the other things that we'll be able to take a look at is that we have software that we use enough to be able to look at some of the behaviors that shape prior to a suspendable or expellable offense, which is what we usually track. So we look at things like office referrals, the time of day, who's the one who's, which person is actually making the referral, so that this way we can actually start looking at whether or not if our supports are working or if we need to target in certain areas. So there are a few other metrics that we'll be able to look at as well. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I do think it's an interesting thing what the metrics are, because it's also a lot of these things aren't easily measured in such a way, and maybe it's not even appropriate. But just how we're going to know that this has been successful transition to this new code of conduct is just going to be an interesting thing moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Joyner, and then Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, I want to go back to some things that pediatrician board member has said about mental health, because quite frankly, if we can straighten that out, kids will be free to learn more effectively. An anxious brain does not learn well. And given the cultural climate in this country and the world, children are exposed to sights, sounds, and actually in-home experiences. I'm talking from my own personal experiences, that really does cause high levels of anxiety and cortisol release. And she talked about the body, how the body responds to that. And we're seeing all of that. And which means that while the world is holding us accountable for test scores, we're trying to restore our children, and we're trying to help them with healthy psychosocial emotional growth. And we're also trying to help them become moral persons. And that takes a long time. It takes a lot of resources. And thankfully, we do have some teachers that are therapeutic just by walking in the classroom. That's something you don't learn in school. But we have some structures, the student staff support team, that I think we need to, if they're not beefed up, beef them up. I also believe, and Mr. Jim Joseph and I have talked about this, and Dr. Tracy have as well. We need a behavioral framework so that we can measure individual growth. And I think it's there, and I'll talk to them more about it. Certainly, developmental pathways is one, but there's another one that's far more specific, that allows the kid to assess himself, allows the parent to assess the kid's growth, and allows the teacher and administrators to assess the child's growth. And it's based on the kinds of behaviors that are critically important in a learning environment and in the world. And Ms. Joseph and I had a conversation about that yesterday. No, it was Sunday. We had a conversation about that. Dr. Tracy and I have been talking about it on and on. So in terms of metrics, we need group metrics that look at suspensions and changes in grades and so on and so forth. But we also need a way to zero in on a child. And that's the medical model that Dr. Jackson knows very well. First, do no harm, diagnose what the problem is, prescribe, and then look at measured growth over time and reward and reinforce. And that will probably work for most of our kids. Unfortunately, and I'll speak from my own family, so nobody can accuse me of talking about other people's children. There are some children who are so damaged that the normal school treatment is not sufficient. And I think, and they can create a lot of problems for themselves and for others. And in some cases, there's organic damage. And I would let Dr. Jackson speak to that. I'm a clinical person, but I'm not a doctor. And unfortunately, even a place like ACEs is overwhelmed now. because I have mentees that work there. And so I guess I'm asking that the board and that the general public understand that in 2021, this is not your old school. We are dealing with a different set of challenges, and we're trying to organize in such a way structurally and culturally and get the right talent in place so that we can do something about it. And I do believe that the database, identifying the kids that are struggling the most, identifying the treatments that we're prescribing for them, looking at group changes as well as individual changes, and rewarding children for their growth. Hill House, for 2 consecutive years, led the entire nation in gain scores on standardized tests, but they also led in measures of behavior. And all of those kids that came in as freshmen graduated, every single one of them. And that was unprecedented. And so we can do it again, but we've got to get behind these folk. And my question for Jim and Joseph Lumpkin is that, do we have a database presently where principals and teachers can identify those kids that are struggling the most, both in terms of conduct as well as academic performance? And sometimes they go hand in hand. And can we be able to chart growth over time? And can we customize a response to kids like that in a school so that they can get the kind of support they need, and high interest materials and field trips and all those other kinds of things that have worked in the past?
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Jackson?
So.
That's a question.
Yeah, it's a question, right? Yeah. Do we have
So
a
that-
Dr. Tracy.
Dr. Tracy?
So I hear Dr. Joyner, but I wanted to go back to what Dr. Jackson so eloquently highlighted also about what she's seeing in her practice. It is real. Having been around to the schools and see what's going on, it is real. Teachers are struggling to keep their classes together. We have students running out of the classrooms. We have people having to give up time to be holding back students. And then you know what that is. You try to restrain a child from running out and something happens. Like, for example, I have long nails and my nail got to the child and you know what that's going to be. You just scratch my child, things like those. So I'm very concerned for our teachers and our administrators, as well as I'm very concerned about the students and needing help to control themselves. The mental health issue is real in our building. We've had it before, but I think it has been heightened by the situations we have at hand. And I've spoken to staff, rather than pushing into the academics and things, we have to pull back a little bit and reset. Who are the students we have in front of us? We recognize that something like that would have happened. That's why in our wisdom, we decided for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade classes to lower the class sizes for the teachers. We knew there would be a lot of challenges there, and there are challenges there, even with a small class size. So the challenges we face are primarily at the kindergarten level right now, and I think the middle school and 9th grade. Serious challenges, and can you imagine what happened? They've missed out on a number of days of school, missed out from structure. And now they have to get acclimated back to what school is like for the most part. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of the challenges. Do we have sufficient mental health folks to support us? I don't think so. That's something we still have to continue to explore. We work with Clifford Bears, we work with other groups that Gemma has reached out to and what have you, but it's still not enough. Clifford Bears alone cannot take on what we see happening right now. We have to explore other avenues of getting support for our children. And I am very concerned because it is multiplied. The multiplication of what we have right now dealing with is, I would say, unprecedented. And sometimes here at the central office, people would expect us to have a magic wand to wave and to wave and it's done. No, we can't. People are saying don't suspend, but sometimes that's all the principal have in their hands to keep a little, order in their school to suspend. And then on the other hand, we're told not to suspend, and we understand that. We had one school that they were fighting every single day. Every single day there were fights. We had a school that called us all to come to Macedonia and help us. Come over and help us. We need support. Doctor is laughing. Come over, we need help. And everybody was all hands on deck to be helpful because we're watching what's happening. Teachers are calling out because maybe they're overwhelmed themselves. And so when teachers call out, put on top of, medical leave and all these things, then the school is left like crazy to deal with all the different things that's happening in the school. So it's a challenge for our principals, it's a challenge for our teachers, and it's a challenge for our kids. And we are trying to work on how can we best help them to mitigate. We have pushed money into youth, family, community engagement, but we know that's still not enough for the demands that we see at hand. It is for real. And I wish if we could get a chance to go into some schools, of course, you have to show that you're vaccinated, go into some schools to see some of the things the teachers and the students and the staff they're up against. And as my administrators share with me daily, they get a call just about daily, help, please help. So it's all our issues, it's all our problems. It's not just the superintendent, it's not just the board, it's everybody who works around kids and work for kids. So I'm just saying to you as a superintendent, it's a real challenge. And Dr. Jackson hit the nail on the head right then and there. And Dr. Joyner added to that. It's a real problem. Gemma, now Doc asked your question.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. To Dr. Joyner's question, it is a growth area for us to be able to track the data in the way I believe that he's described. We are testing with VOC now with a grant that came from the state, specifically focused on students who have high incidence of chronic absenteeism. We are testing when we provide the intervention. Who are the people providing the intervention? What is the intervention provided? And what is the outcome? So are we seeing better behavior? Are we seeing better academics? Are we seeing better attendance? So that is happening with a small group of students using the VOC software to track the students, the intervention, as well as the outcome. But it certainly is, I would certainly identify the tracking of interventions and the various community partners and schools that help us with that work as an area of growth.
Thank you, Gemma. And that ends if there are no more questions from the board, that ends
Dr. Jackson had a question or a comment.
I just wanted to make a comment around Mrs. With the youth, family, and community engagement. I really am impressed with how they step in around some of these things. Like I've sent some names to some kids who really was tearing the school up from the bottom to the roof, to the backyard, to the steps. I mean, and the child just doesn't, they're just not understanding, you know what I'm saying? And like Dr. Tracy said, there's not, what can we do? You know what I'm saying? We can't restrain, like it's just so much. But that department has really stepped in, and for me, in some cases that I found to be very, very challenging and difficult. So I'm hoping that, thank you, Gemma, with what you guys are doing. And I don't mean to be throwing more on your plate, but you guys might have to step it up with all of this that's going on with this mental health that we are seeing. I mean, you guys know how to approach it with the code of conduct. And that's really important because some of the stuff that we're seeing, what's happening is being fueled by the mental health crisis that's going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, not necessarily, the child is not just a bad kid. there's something going on, and I think that the code of conduct is going to really help to bring that out, and help to bring resources to you guys to get this work done. You're going to be busy because there's all this stuff going on. You're going to be busy. So don't be surprised, but you're going to be busy. And it's right now we're in red alert around that. So I just wanted to say that in the relationship to a lot of this that's going on with the code of conduct in that department. It's going to be busy. We're in a crisis mode, not just with education, but behind all of that. So I just wanted to add that to my comment.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
That's
Dr.
the
Tracy, please.
end of my report. Thank you for listening and for sharing your ideas and thoughts. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. So for President's report, at our last meeting, we approved the goals submitted by Dr. Tracy and the evaluation form. You have in your packets the finalized timeline with, of course, a typo. I added the executive session in case we decided we need to discuss any of this further. Otherwise, we'll make the correction of the typos and email it to the full board during the week. So if you're okay with that, then we don't need to go into executive session, but if not, then we're able to go into executive session to discuss anything further on that.
Point of order, Madam President.
Mr. Hudson?
In terms of executive session, we got an email today about the school bus contracts. We're going to discuss that.
We're going to executive session.
So we
for
are
that,
going to
yeah.
executive session. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I'm fine with the materials you've provided so far. I don't see the need for executive session for that. I mean, if somebody else does, then I'm fine with that also, but I don't see the need for that at this point.
Sounds good. So, yeah, just let me know before we get there, and if so, we can just go into executive session. But if not, I'll email the corrected timeline, correcting the typos or the typo.
It has implementation with a date.
It's well, I don't want to discuss it in public, but it's just a typo you and I talked about earlier.
Oh, with the dates, okay.
Yeah, with the dates. Headstart report, Mr. Wilcox?
Just a very brief one, just that.
Madam President, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilcox, but it's about the item we just discussed. This will become a public document once we approve it, is that correct?
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wilcox?
Okay, just real quick on Head Start, that there are still spaces available and we need to get as many kids in Head Start as possible. I have no report beyond that.
Okay, any questions or comments for Mr. Wilcox on that?
Hearing none, if you would like, I'll just go on to the next one.
Yes, please.
So for the citywide school building committee report, also there's no report on this because our next meeting is in 2 days on this Thursday. The agenda is posted and there'll also will be posted the report on how things are going in the facilities, et cetera. So that's always an interesting thing to take a look at.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
For finance and operations, nothing else to report other than the action items. And then we also had updates regarding the transportation issues that Mr. Jackson has already filled the whole board in on. And then we did request some information about financial implications. So that will likely be on our next agenda. And then finally is just, I asked for this to be put on just for this meeting, an update on the Committee on Student Elections. This committee has started up early this year. So this is the joint committee with the city and the school district. that will help manage and govern the student elections for the student board member. Goal is to really try to promote the idea for students to be part of this. So just a request, I know there's a lot of principals and folks that are on that observe our meetings, and thanks for all the work you do, but also if you could just be putting the word out in your high schools for people who are, if I remember correctly, it's 10th graders are the ones that are able to run. The elections will be happening after the first of the year. More information about that, but it's really important that we start to promote the idea. The second thing is some of the election folks for the city are also part of this meeting. And so there's a general request that we make sure that our high school students have access to them and they have access to the high school students to come in for voter registration for those of our students who are eligible to vote. I think they've had some issues this year with, COVID and all those kinds of things. We just a broad request to the district and to the principals to make sure you're facilitating access for the elections folks for nonpartisan election registration activities, particularly the ones from the city there, so that we can get as many people as registered as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. I brought this up before. I'm really concerned by the participation by the students. I don't think we had an orientation for them this year. And I think I really think there should be a discussion around how we could better help them be fully engaged with this board. I think they need some more structure in terms of what they can do and be focused on and so on. And I know it would be daunting for any high school student to join our meetings and fully participate. It's daunting for adults to do it. So I see Dr. Joyner has his hand up, so I'm assuming he's going to respond to that. I heard him say that he's had conversations with the students, and I know that he volunteered to be sort of kind of a mentor. So I'd like to hear more about what we're doing, but I also like to see it built into the board structure sometime in the future, how we do that. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Joyner, sorry.
Well, I think Mr. Goldson makes a great point. One, it should be part of the structure, not only for students, but new board members. And so we do need to design an orientation for them. A good example with the students, I've been talking to them on a regular basis and addressing some of the issues that Mr. Goldson has talked about. But a good example is Anthony had to work tonight. And he had said that he wanted to weigh in on the cultural heritage situation. So when he sent me a text message, I said, well, send what you have to say to the board. And I believe we can design a really good orientation for students, but also for board members in general. And it should be a part of our structure as a board. Within a certain amount of time, after a person has been appointed or elected, we should have that. And I think what I'd like to do is just ask board members to send me suggestions they have in terms of content and skills. And Mr. Goldson, I would like to ask you to work with me on that. And let's get it done.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, we can move on to the facility naming report. Dr. Jackson? Or governance report first, sorry.
Governance has no report today. There were some things that we wanted to put forth, but I needed to get one. Mr. Wilcox is working on a couple of them with me, and I needed to get a little bit more input before I brought it to you. So we should have something at the next one.
And facility naming report?
No report.
No report. Mr. Conway, Food Service Task Group?
No report. We have a meeting tomorrow and the agenda and the minutes are posted. We have not had a meeting since, we haven't had a meeting since our last board meeting, but we will be meeting tomorrow. And again, the agenda is posted and the minutes.
Thank you. Compensation Equity Committee report?
No report.
Thank you. All right, so with that, I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12006E and 1210B10 regarding.
Point of order, Madam President, Dr. Tracy is waving at you.
Oh, I can't see you, Dr.
Thanks,
Tracy.
Mr. Goldsberg, for capturing this. So
Go ahead.
just got some news that's going to impact one of our schools tomorrow. There's a water main break at Hill House. And a major water main break at Hill House High School, which means that all students will have to work remotely. We're just getting the message out to staff right now. There's, yes, major water main break. And they have to shut off all faucets and lavatories, etc. Mr. Harmon is sending out to the school and to the press right now to notify them, so the message can go out. All students have their devices, so we're pretty safe.
Okay.
We have to work remotely, yes. Dr. Jackson said, oh. Just came in, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy.
You're welcome.
All right, so now, if anyone's gonna wave now, because I was almost halfway through reading all of that. Okay.
Flash.
All right, so I'll move that we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12006E and 1210B10 regarding discussion of exempt written communications and the information contained therein privileged by the attorney-client relationship. And we'll invite Mr. Carlson, at least for a part of it, Dr. Tracy, and Attorney Alexiadis. And
Mr. Carlson? You mean Mr. Jackson?
Carl Jackson, yes, that's, you know, that's the mixing of the two names. And we should have gotten a link.
Did you say Mr. Alexiadis also?
Attorney Alexiadis, yes. And we have the link by Ms. Hannons in our emails. Is there a second?
Second.
One other question, is the COO joining us also, or just those two, just the superintendent?
Just Mr. Lamb should be with us.
Mr. Lamb should be with us?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, so let's include Mr. Lamb. Is there, and does the second still stand?
Yes.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Conaway,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. And so we'll see you in executive session.
We received a link from Ms. Hannons.
Ms. Hannons. Mhm.
Okay.
Keisha, can you send me the link, please?
It's just been sent. Mr. Jackson, you're going to log off this meeting. Ms. Red Hannons is sending you a link for a different meeting. So log out of this and
Are we all back? 1, 2, 3. 7. Okay. All right, and so we are out of executive session and back in regular session. There were no votes in executive session. Mr. Goldson, you have a question or a comment or?
Madam President, I meant to mention this in executive session, but it's certainly okay to mention it here, I think. I hope next time we have an executive session similar to that, those kind of issues, that we should also make sure that our spokesperson is in the meeting, because there were some issues we talked about around communication that I think he should have been a part of. So I hope next time we don't forget to invite our communications director also.
And our chief financial officer, because it has financial implications as well.
Absolutely. That's right.
Executive session?
Just step back.
Yeah.
No taken, thank you.
Because there is here in our meeting.
Oh, Dr. Tracy, you're not muted.
Yeah, no, she was
No, I was
answering.
talking to you, I said our.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
there you go.
I know, I was like, it looked like you were on your phone, so.
Our spokesperson is here in this meeting, he's not showing up on this, no, he's on the screen.
Yeah, no,
Session?
Mr. Golson meant for the executive session. We're back in regular session. Executive session is over. We're back in regular session. No votes were taken in executive session.
Right.
Okay.
Madam President, Dr. Joyner and I both suggested that we should have our communications director and our finance director in those kind of meetings in the future.
Oh, okay.
Linda should be on the scene. She knows what's up.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Wilcox?
So moved.
Oh.
Move we adjourn.
Second. Bye.
Do
you like my coffee?
Mr. Wilcox?
You have to vote, Doc.
We have to vote, Dr. Joyner.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was getting ready to do
Dr. Joyner?
Douglas MacArthur. Yes.
Dr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Good night, everyone, and thank you all.